Okay, so today we are in part 2 of this teaching on unity and division in the body of Messiah. And in part 1, we discussed and we talked about that unity is the desire of Yeshua. We read through John 17, most of the whole chapter there, and in those 26 verses that we read, we could see that there's this prayer from Yeshua for those that he has taught, those that would follow after him, that they would be echad, or one, as he and the Father are one, in the same manner, in likeness of the relationship that he has with his Father, that those of us in the body would have that same relationship, that same understanding of what it means to be unified or in unity together. Father, that they would be one as we are one, was his prayer. We saw that in several of the verses. We see it in verse 21 and in verse 23. We also understand that he said that in our unity, we show the world that the Father sent the Son. Because the Son came to bring that unity together by sharing with us his lifestyle, his understanding, his instructions, his teachings, and to encourage us to be submissive as he is to his Father's instructions. And so that unity was the prayer and the desire of Yeshua, and we did spend quite a bit of time going through that. And so now that we have that understanding, I want us to now go forward and start looking at what the problem is. Where's the problem then? Because his prayer is that we have unity. If they had had it in his day, he wouldn't have had to pray for that. Or if he expected it to be in the future, he wouldn't have had to pray for that. So he knew there was going to be a problem. So let's look at the problem itself. We'll begin in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and take a look at the problem. And so we're going to read a good chunk here, starting in verse 1. Shaul, a called emissary of Yeshua Messiah, by the desire of Elohim and brother Sosthenes, to the assembly of Elohim which is at Corinth, to those who are set apart in Messiah Yeshua, called, set apart ones, with all those calling on the name of Yeshua Messiah, our Master, in every place, theirs and ours. Favor to you and peace from Elohim, our Father, and the Master, Yeshua Messiah. Now let's stop there for a second. There are those that wrongly conclude, and it's been taught to them probably as they've been raised through the church system, that somehow once you are, quote unquote, of the set apart ones, you've got it all under control. Well, everything that Shaul is going to say from this point forward, correctively, scoldingly, chastisingly, whatever it is that you want to call it, because he gets pretty strong with them at different points after this beginning, is being directed to those who are set apart in Messiah, called set apart ones, with all those calling on the name of Yeshua. That is the group he's talking to. Apparently, being in that category doesn't mean you don't have issues. Apparently, being in that category doesn't mean that you're now perfect and have no need of anything. It means that you are in the starting point. He says, favor to you and peace from Elohim our Father and Master Yeshua Messiah. I thank my Elohim always concerning you for the favor of Elohim which was given to you by Messiah Yeshua, that in him you were enriched in all, in every word and all knowledge, as the witness of Messiah was confirmed in you, so that you are not lacking in any gift, eagerly waiting for the revelation of our Master Yeshua Messiah, who shall also confirm you to the end, unreprovable in the day of our Master Yeshua Messiah. Elohim is trustworthy, by whom you were called into fellowship of his Son, Yeshua Messiah our Master. And I appeal to you. Now listen, he just went through all of this. You guys are great, and you're all confirmed, and you're getting all these gifts, and you have all this favor, and you're set apart. And I appeal to you, brothers, by the name of our Master Yeshua Messiah, that you all agree, and that there be no divisions among you, but that you be knit together in the same mind, in the same opinion. Now, if all of that stuff pre this verse, from verses 1 through 9, was the way you were always taught, there would be no need for verse 10. Why does he need to bring up verse 10? Because then we're going to see in verse 11, he says, for I have been informed concerning you, my brothers, by those of the house of Chloe, that there are strifes among you. Strifes among the set apart, called out, ones who know the name of Yeshua, those who have favor and blessing and are not lacking in any gift. They're striving amongst themselves? You betcha they were. just like we do. See, sometimes we could fall into that place of complacency thinking, oh, but we have all this wonderful stuff, so we must be all great and wonderful. Shaul's saying, no, don't do that. Because all of that stuff that was given to you, if you're not applying it in, how does he say here? Together in the same mind and in the same opinion and not striving amongst yourselves, amongst each other, there was no point in giving you all that stuff anyway. Why give you all of that stuff? The reason to give you all of that good stuff was John 17. Father, that they may be one as we are one. That's the reason to give you all of this set apartness and giftings and favor, etc., etc. So that we could be achad. Not just with each other, but achad with each other as we are achad with Messiah, who is achad with the Father. But he says, look, I know that there are striving among you already. But he wants us to have no divisions among us, but that we be knit together in the same mind and in the same opinion. In the same opinion. Look, I come from the Jewish community where 3 Jews, 5 opinions. Of the same opinion, I don't think we got 5 or 10 of us together, we would find that we all have the same opinion on a lot of things. But we're supposed to be of the same mind. But this goes back to Philippians 2:5. Let this mind be in you. See, that's the mind that we're supposed to be. Everybody thinks that everybody has to agree with my mind. Like, point the finger at yourself, right? You need to have a mind like my mind. No, we all have to have a mind like his mind. Let that mind be in you. Then we wouldn't be arguing and fighting anymore. But we do. And there are divisions amongst us. Give me a second. I want to just go into my phone here because I wrote a few notes very late last night as I was going to bed. I want to make sure I don't forget the points I wanted to bring into here. Okay, so I just have that on my phone here. Good. So he's appealing to them, and then he says, but wait a minute. I've heard that there are some strifes among you. Now, he's going to give us an example of one of them. And I want us to look at that example and see how we can apply it today. He says, what I mean is this, that each of you says, I am of Shaul, I am of Apollos, I am of Kepha, I am of Messiah. So what was going on there is they were pointing to teachers. I'm of this teacher. I follow this teacher. And so don't we see that today when people go on YouTube and on the internet all over the place trying to find teachers? Oh, I follow this guy, and I follow that guy, and I follow this guy. Well, no, we all should be following Mashiach, Messiah. Shaul says, has the Messiah been divided? Has the Messiah been divided? Was Shaul impaled for you? Or were you immersed in the name of Shaul? I thank Elohim that I immersed not one of you except Crispus and Gaius, that no one should say that I immersed into my own name. Now I did also immerse the household of Stephanas. For the rest, I do not know whether I immersed anyone else. For Messiah did not send me to immerse, but to bring the good news, not with wisdom of words, that the stake of Messiah should not be nullified. So what we're seeing here is that all of this is about saying, look, I didn't come here to do all these things so that I would get any credit. Not about me. See, one of the things we're going to figure out that one of the major, if not the most important cause or critical cause of all this fighting and division and dissension and strife is that some of us have not gotten the message that it's not about you. And so the people, now I'm not saying that Apollos or Shaul thought it was about them, but the people decided to make it about them. The people said, oh, but I'm of this guy. Oh, that makes us special in some way. Or I'm of that one, or I'm of this one. Well, all of them were supposed to be leading you to Mashiach, who leads you to the Father. So let's not lose sight of that whole thing. So Messiah is not divided, but we could use any issue. This could be the calendar. This could be the nature of the Godhead. This could be Sabbath keeping and how to keep Shabbat. I mean, we really don't fight about a lot of different things. This could be using the name and how to use it, when to use it, whether to use it or not. These are the things we fight about, we argue about, and we have division. And so what do? We find, and people, what do? We send links to websites with attachments to documents and try to make our arguments and to convince everybody of a bunch of stuff. Well, we're going to see that that's not the way to behave. But let's continue. Let's go to chapter 3. We'll stay here in 1 Corinthians in chapter 3. And he says, we'll begin in verse 1 here. And I, brothers, was not able to speak to you as to spiritual ones, Wait a minute. Didn't he just say in the beginning of chapter 1, these are those who are set apart in Messiah, called set apart ones, with all those calling on the name of Yeshua Messiah? See, some people can misread chapter 1 and not catch chapter 3 is talking to the same people. Because there is this idea in Christianity that if you do these minimal things, you've arrived. And what is Shaul saying? He said, no, this arriving is the starting gate. You're not arriving at the finish line. This is the start point. To start, you need to be set apart in Messiah, called set apart ones, all those who call on the name of Yeshua. That's the starting point. So listen to what he says to them. I, brothers, was not able to speak to you as to spiritual ones, but as to fleshly, as to the babes in Messiah. By spiritual ones, we talked about what is spiritual is what is of Abba. So he says the world has its own fleshly way of seeing the world and seeing things and seeing what's right and what's wrong. And then there's the Father's way of seeing the way things are and what's right and what's wrong. He said, I want to teach you that which is spiritual, not that which is ethereal and ooey gooey, whatever you can't grasp. But he said those things that are above. But you were still fleshly. You were still hanging out down below and focused on the things below. By the way, when it's about me, I, then you're in the world, you're fleshly. When it's about him, now you're looking at spiritual things. Okay, that's at least a minimal parameter. He said, I fed you with milk and not with solid food, for until now you were not able to receive it. So then people can stop right there and go, see, oh yeah, that's before. See, we weren't spiritual then, and we weren't called out, set apart. He says, but he says, and even now you're still not able. So you can't just jump into half that verse and say, see, that was the old before. We're able to handle it now. He says, no, you're still not able to handle it. I think if he was alive today, Shaul would look around and say, put me in a straitjacket and lock me up. I'm going crazy. Nothing's changed. I think he'd be mortally depressed that nothing has changed in 2,000 years. He says, for until now you were not able to receive it. Even now you are still not able. Why? For you are still fleshly. For since there is envy and strife and divisions among you, are you not fleshly and walking according to man? Envy and strife. So there are those that, what's envy look like? Well, in this week's Torah portion coming up, we're going to see Korach envying. We saw Miriam and Aaron envying things going on with Moshe. Oh, well, how come you got that job? I'd like that job, but why can't I have that job? Oh, you got a great racket going on there, you guys, you know? So there's envy of the teacher, envy of leadership, envy of other people. We have all this envy stuff, but then we also have strife and divisions. And by divisions, we don't mean just that we've broken up into separate congregations, although it includes that. But you can have divisions inside of a little congregation. You can have division inside of a little home fellowship. In other words, those that take one stance and those that take an opposite stance or a different stance. That's division. That's not unity. And when Paul talked about it, what did he say? He said, I wish you would be of one mind and one opinion. That's a stretch. Boy, that's going to be tough. I think that's going to require the rod of iron for us to get to that one opinion part. The rod of iron. He says again, he's giving the example, for one says, I am of Shaul, and another, I am of Apollos. Are you not fleshly? What then is Apollos, and what is Shaul, but servants through whom you believed, as the master assigned to each? In other words, it's okay if some were assigned to Apollos, and some to Kepha, and some to Shaul, and some to other people. He said, however, these are the masters. He said, I planted, Apollos watered, but Elohim is giving growth. So neither he who plants, nor he who waters is any at all, but Elohim who gives the increase. And he who plants and he who waters are one, and each one shall receive his own reward according to his own labor. For we are fellow workers of Elohim. Give me a chance to turn the page here. We are fellow workers of Elohim. You are in the field of Elohim, the building of Elohim. According to the favor of Elohim, which was given to me as a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation, and another builds on it. But each one should look how he builds on it. So what is he saying here? He says, look, I am an anointed, appointed teacher. I'm a master builder. I'm building up you. Okay? We could see in 1 Corinthians that we're going to see in chapter 6 that, or don't you know that your body is the dwelling place of the Ruach? He says, and I'm a master builder. I'm trying to build you up into what? Into the image of the Son. Trying to build you up into that well-pleasing servant. That well-done, good and trustworthy servant. I'm trying to build you up is what he's saying. He said, look, and then others can come and build on that because he didn't stay forever with them. He's traveling. He left after he planted. You know, there's a lot of you that were with other ministries before you got to me, and some of you might end up with other ministries after you get to me. But the point is, no divisiveness, no division. One plants, another waters, another one builds on top of something else. But that's not normally what happens. Normally what happens is we have, I didn't like his calendar or his way of seeing the Godhead or this or that, so I'm going to go over there and find another one. Look, if Abba draws you to some place, you need to make sure that you understand whether or not you're supposed to be there or not, and if you're supposed to be there, stay. Now, it could be that you ended up someplace that Abba didn't draw you, you drew yourself to it. It looked good to you, you kind of thought it felt good in the beginning, and so it was you. Be careful. Be very careful, and people do this all the time. It really is one of my pet peeves. I do apologize for mentioning that. But I don't really feel that it's appropriate for you to constantly say, oh, the Father did this and the Father did that until the whole thing plays out. Because you don't know if it was you or him. Okay? You don't know. I'll give you an example. I felt led to bring somebody from another part of the country to this part of the country. I went and picked them up. I got the moving trucks, and we moved them here, and it didn't end up working out. And then when it didn't work out, I did talk to them. I said, look, I don't know why you're no longer trusting. It's a whole thing with the handicap situation, and I was helping them. I said, I don't know why you're not trusting me. I brought you here, and as soon as I said I brought you here, they said, oh, no. The Father brought us here. I said, oh, no, the jury's still out. It's starting to look like it was me because it wasn't working out, you see? So you can't just judge because you got what you wanted, that the Father actually was involved intervening because you got what you wanted. The fruit will show later, okay? Now, there are opportunities where you ask for something to be intervened on and that specific thing is dealt with. Well, then that is clearly you could say, okay, the Father got involved in that kind of thing. But be careful giving the credit to the Father for something that hasn't played out yet that he might not want credit for because he'd allowed it. He allowed it to happen, so maybe everybody involved gets a lesson from it. But that doesn't mean that it was his desire necessarily that what happened. And we are all so quick to say, oh, the Father did this and the Father did that. Well, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Let's watch and see. I'm hoping that makes sense. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the Father. I think sometimes we're disrespectful for the Father because we want to tell oh, the Father did this, and some of us are going, I'm not really sure he did that because some of us understand the Father doesn't really approve of some of the things you think he's intervening on. So I would rather just sit back and watch. And so let's understand that. Okay, now, so he says, for no one's able to lay any other foundation except that which is laid, which is Yeshua Messiah. So what's the foundation? Yeshua. Well, what's Yeshua? He's Messiah, the Son of the living Elohim, our high priest. He's the living, walking, talking Torah. He's truth. He's life. He's the way. That's your foundation. Okay, so you can't build on anything else. So if anybody's building on anything else than that, well, that's already a disaster. And then if somebody starts to build on that foundation, anything that stops to be exactly on that foundation, in other words, building it in a whole different direction, that's not going to work either. Let's understand that. Okay, he says, if anybody builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work shall be revealed, for the day shall show it up, because it is revealed by fire, and the fire shall prove the work of each one, what sort it is. So that's how you're going to know. He doesn't say you're going to know just because somebody claimed it was the Father's work. He says, oh, we're going to know because fire is going to come and test it. That's why you got to listen to the teaching, baptism of fire. to understand correctly what the fire represents and how Abba uses fire according to Scripture in your life. So how are we really going to know? See, fire came into that situation when I brought those gentlemen up from the other state. And guess what? The fire showed it really wasn't necessarily the Father's work. Although the Father's using it, use it for them, used it for me. You understand what I'm saying? But the fire is going to show what sort of work it is. If anyone's work remains, which he has built on, he shall receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned, he shall suffer loss, but he himself shall be saved, but as through fire. So let's understand that verse 15 is not saying, no matter what you do, you're going to be saved anyway. He's saying, look, as through fire, you'll be saved. In other words, if you allow the fire to do its job, to get your attention so that you make the appropriate adjustments and changes, you will be saved. Because otherwise, you could read this verse that says, why is Paul even bothering if he says it doesn't matter? We're going to be saved anyway. Why would Paul make such a big deal about how we build and what we're doing, what we're building, and how we're building it to look like whatever we're building it on the right foundation, etc. If when the fire comes and burns it all up, we're saved anyway, then what was the point? He says, but as through fire. So what does fire do? Fire purifies. So if you allow the fire to be a refining fire, to purify and get the dross off the top and clean you out to be pure, then the fire's done its job. Now you will be saved. Let's make sure we understand that. He says, do you not know that you are the dwelling place of Elohim and that the Spirit of Elohim dwells in you? So here it is in chapter 3 and verse 16, same thing that we said earlier. It's also in chapter 6 and verse 19, all right? He says, do you not know that? He says, if anyone, now, so what is he trying to tell you? He's trying to tell you that he's not talking about building houses or farms or barns or places of commerce. He's talking about building you. This is what he's talking about, building you. He says, if anyone destroys the dwelling place of Elohim, Elohim shall destroy him. For the dwelling place of Elohim is set apart, which you are. So he's saying is if you go about destroying this dwelling place of Elohim, he's going to destroy you. So we might want to take a little bit more thought of how we take care of his dwelling place. I'm not just talking about physically with your health, although that's probably a part of it. But what do you take, this body which he bought and paid for, what do you have it doing? What are your behaviors? What actions are you taking? What's coming out of your mouth? What are you doing? He says, let no one deceive himself. If anyone among you seems to be wise in this age, let him become foolish so that he might become wise. So first of all, the problem really is in that first part of that verse. The reason why there's still divisions, the reason why people are still struggling is because we're all likely and susceptible to deceiving ourselves. That's where it really happens. We deceive ourselves. We have a line we like to say when people say, how you doing? We say, oh, I'm okay. What's okay? Okay means that something's not good enough or right and everything else because you should be wonderful, fabulous, and just walking, in the direction of the Father and all that other stuff. Okay means there's not everything in line there yet. I'm okay means I'm tolerating my life and I'm not going to whine about it. That's what it means when it says, I'm okay. I'm all right. I've got a lot to say, but I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. That's what that means. He says, don't deceive yourself, because we deceive ourselves and say, oh, I'm okay. I can take care. This is all right. It's no problem. Don't deceive yourselves. If you're in a fire, the fire is supposed to show you something. Pay attention. See what he's trying to show you. And say, light bulb time. Big light bulb goes up over your head and you go, I got it. I know what I need to do now. I've seen the enemy and it's me. I get the problem. He says the problem is, if anyone seems to be wise in this age, let him become foolish. That's where we get the big problem with the divisions. We deceive ourselves into thinking we figured it out. Oh, I figured out the calendar. Oh, I figured out that the Hebrew word here or Greek word there. I figured out the nature of this and the nature of that. I'm so smart. Or maybe you don't feel so smart, so you found yourself a guy who you think is so smart. Be careful. Everybody's got to do Philippians 2:12. What does that say? Walk out your own salvation with fear and trembling. See, but we get all prideful thinking it's now our job to tell everybody how smart we are or how smart some other guy is and get everybody on that same page. Because I get that more than I get the other. I get a lot of people wanting to send me videos and PDFs and email attachments, all trying to convince me about some guy is so smart and I'm so stupid. There's a pride there. There's an ego there. There's a vanity. And then I get accused of pride when I don't want to follow that line. Well, I'm walking out my own salvation. It's not pride and ego. Oh, but you didn't want to go and, you're not changing and adjusting to the thing I sent you. After all, I proved my case. I showed you how right I am. Okay. Then you walk in it. I don't have to walk in your path. You have to walk in your path. There's a lot of silliness here. He says, verse 19, for the wisdom of this world is foolishness to Elohim, for it has been written, he catches the wise in their craftiness. And again, Yahweh knows the thoughts of the wise, that their thoughts are worthless. You think you got it all figured out? He thinks it's pretty worthless. So then let no one boast in men, for all belongs to you, whether Shaul or Apollos or Kepha, etc., or the world or life or death, or the present or the future, all belongs to you, all belong to Messiah, and Messiah belongs to Elohim. Wow, there's a lot going on in here. It really goes back to verse 1 of that chapter. He says, look, I wanted to give you guys meat, but you were choking on the milk. I wanted to teach you as spiritual, but you were still fleshly. How did he know? Because we're still fighting with each other. We're still arguing, debating, and splitting, and splitting, and splitting, and splitting, and splitting. It's foolishness. It's foolishness. Now, let's go to chapter 11. We're still in 1 Corinthians. Chapter 11. 1 Corinthians chapter 11. Let me get back to my timer here so I know where we're at. Okay, in verse 1. This is this part of the solution, but it's also going to explain the problem. He says, look, become imitators of me, as I also am of Messiah. Now, it's not him just claiming that he follows Messiah. He's saying, look, imitate me if I'm imitating Messiah. When I imitate Messiah, imitate me. That's all the teachers need to be of that mindset. Imitate me as I imitate Messiah. Of course, if you're not imitating Messiah, nobody should be imitating you. So here's where we break down. We've had people come on our live stream or come to our local service, and all of a sudden, Hebrew liturgy goes on the screen. Jewish-looking prayers. And they get all offended by that Jewish stuff. Messiah, who we're to imitate, he did all that. He was in a Jewish synagogue every Shabbat. Every day, every week of his life, when it was Shabbat, he was in a synagogue with the other Jewish people, praying, reading scripture, and doing liturgy. So you're going to have to, you're going to have to get over it. But you know what you're deceiving yourself about? You're deceiving yourself by not admitting you have an anti-Semitic part of you that you haven't dealt with yet. There's a part of you that has a little bit or a lot of anti-Semitism in there, which is why you don't like to wear the tzitzit. I'm sorry, tzitzit aren't Jewish. It's Numbers 15, 37, 38 to 41, where Yahweh says to the children of Israel to wear tzitzit. Oh, but that's Jewish stuff. No, it's not. Oh, you keep those Jewish feasts? No. Leviticus 23, they're Yahweh's feasts. We did that in the teaching previous to this teaching. Got to get over that stuff. He says, look, become imitators of me as I am also of Messiah, and I praise you, brothers, that you remember me in every way and keep, now listen to this, the traditions. Shaul wanted them to keep traditions. He says, keep the traditions as I deliver them to you. I wonder what kind of traditions Paul, Shaul, a Benjamite, a Jew of Jews, as he called himself, a Hebrew of Hebrews, a student of Gamaliel. I wonder, do you think he had Greek traditions or, maybe Mithra traditions? Or do you think maybe they were Jewish traditions? Think that's a long shot there? So do and keep the traditions as I deliver them to you. Because we can't call Torah observance a tradition. It's law. Abba says, do, don't do. Now, some things that we do and don't do are tradition. Other are Torah. And Paul says, look, I want you to, not only that, he says, I praise you that you remember the way I taught you and you keep the traditions as I delivered them to you. I bet you he taught them how to start Shabbat, how to end Shabbat, things to do on Shabbat, things not to do on Shabbat, traditions. You have any thought that he might have taught them to light candles? It's possible on a Friday night. I mean, he says traditions here. So when everybody wants to have a backlash against traditions, now he doesn't tell us which ones they are. But let's just realize that he's praising them for keeping them. Interesting. Now let's jump down to verse 16. If, however, anyone seems to be contentious, we do not have such a habit, nor do the assemblies of Elohim. That should not be our habit. That's not our behavior. We should not be contentious. Now let me tell you what contentious looks like. It looks like one of two things. Either you, meaning the people sitting in the chairs, having contentious issues with the leadership, or having it with each other. Those are the two ways. You're striving and arguing and fighting and debating amongst yourselves, or you're being contentious with the leadership. He says, we do not have such a habit. That's not the habit we should have. But you know what? We do it like breathing. It comes so easy to us to be contentious. It's almost automatic to be in an adversarial or contentious relationship with leadership. Verse 17, and in declaring this, I do not praise you, since you come together not for the better, but for the worse. For in the first place, I hear that when you come together as an assembly, there are divisions among you, and to some extent I believe it. For there have to be factions even among you, so that the approved ones might be revealed among you. This is how Abba is using all of this fighting and division and contention. It has to be so that, listen, the approved ones might be revealed. See, it demonstrates and shows Abba and reveals your level of growth and maturity and character change into the Son, into the image of the Son. When you're still being contentious and striving and dividing and all of that stuff, you're being revealed as not being of the approved ones. Now, here's an interesting thing. Approval is merited. Oh, all those are you saved people and all those, we were unmerited favor, grace people and blah, blah, blah. He said, look, there has to be factions so that the approved, those who merit the words, I approve of what you're doing and of who you are and what you've become, I approve, is merited. It's completely 100% subjective to the one saying it. It's based on his own criteria, in this case, our Heavenly Father, who to our big advantage and blessing, gave us a written word to tell us what brings those words. So it's not just subjective. It's actually becomes more objective. He tells us, if you do and you don't do as I've instructed, I approve of that. When you don't, I don't approve of that. So these divisions, these factions among us are to show and demonstrate and reveal among us who is approved. That should make you wonder and think about the next time you're causing division and strife and everything else. Very powerful stuff. Go to chapter 6 of Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 16. Oh, wow, I opened right to it. Perfect. I've got the scriptures trained. It opens right to where I want it to go. Proverbs 6:16. These 6 matters Yahweh hates, and 7 are an abomination to him. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands shedding innocent blood, a heart devising wicked schemes, feet quick to run to evil, a false witness breathing out lies, and here's the 7th one, and the one who causes strife among brothers. Now you could read that there are 6 that he hates, and the 7th one, he hates it even more. It's an abomination. Abomination is about the strongest term Yahweh ever uses for something that he doesn't approve of. that he does not like. And so the seventh one there is the one who causes strife among the brothers. So we should be taking that very seriously. Matthew 12:25, real quickly. Matthew 12:25. I wasn't going to push it and try to open right to that verse, just to... Matthew 12:25, one verse here, he says, "And Yeshua knew their thoughts and said to them, every kingdom or reign divided against itself is laid waste, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand." So here we were told in Proverbs that an abomination is when those among the body, among the brothers, are causing division. And Yeshua is saying that's why the body doesn't stand as a body. A house divided against itself can't stand. How can it stand? A kingdom or a house divided amongst itself cannot stand. It will collapse. So let's look at what the cause of the problem is for all this. Okay, so we know the issue is a maturity issue to some degree. And so I'm going to break down a little bit the cause of the problem in what I call the paradigm shifts. Okay? In your life, you have gone through these three shifts trying to get to the fourth one. We'll call them paradigm shifts. We can call them levels of development. The first one is a paradigm shift in our focus. So a paradigm, in case you don't know what the word paradigm means, I'm not going to embarrass anybody, but paradigm is a very clear and set understanding of how things are. Okay? In other words, we have a paradigm understanding that if I pick this phone up and drop it, it will fall. If I drop it and it goes sideways, that would really shift your paradigm. Okay? So paradigms are the way we understand things to be in very, in specific areas. So we have shifted our focus, hopefully, from that which is horizontal to that which is vertical. From secular to spiritual. That's what we're supposed to shift our focus. See, because we used to understand, I need to worry about, am I happy? Am I safe? Am I providing my physical needs? It was all this horizontal type of stuff. Then our focus hopefully would shift to, what does Abba want? What makes him happy? What is his desire? Instead of worrying about what makes me happy and my desire. It's a shift focus. We have to shift our focus from here, horizontally, to vertical. And I think most of us have done that to some degree, but we still struggle at times because we try to convince ourselves that what's vertical is what the Father wants to give us permission to do what we want horizontally. So we have issues there still. Then, of course, we had a paradigm shift in our identity. See, there's a paradigm in the Christianity that the church is now the body of Messiah. The church. That's the paradigm. But I think we came to learn through the teachings on the identity, discovering your identity, in that teaching series that, no, it's about Israel. It's about being the children of Israel. So our whole identity shift had to go through a process. And so we've had striving along the way. If our focus is still out of whack, or our identity issues are still out of whack, we're going to still be striving and fighting amongst each other. Because we don't have the same mind, same focus, same identity understandings, we're going to be divided. Then there was a shift in our paradigm on what's acceptable behavior-wise. See, you were raised probably by parents, whether they were secular or not, saying this is right and this is wrong. And by the way, depending on where you grew up, when you grew up, and what kind of environment you grew up in, you may have been taught differently than someone growing up in a totally different environment at a different time with a different understanding of what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Back not too long ago, men went to baseball games in suits. We look at that and think it's funny. If you walked in dressed casually in shorts and a t-shirt, they would have looked at you as funny and probably thrown you out. Because societally, in a period of time, in a period of culture, in a situational setting, there's paradigms and understanding of what's acceptable. Now, hopefully you've had that shift from the world's understanding to a Abba understanding. In other words, from lawlessness to Torah observance. That is now our standard or paradigm as to what is appropriate behavior-wise. So these are big shifts that we were making, because you know what, at one point in your life, you maybe didn't even realize, I know I didn't, that there was really a vertical component to anything. I was raised a secular Jew. And secular Jews don't really think very much about vertical connection. It's about a horizontal relationship as being a Jew as a part of a Jewish community. Okay? Now, you may have been raised, for example, let's say you were raised in a community in a town that was all Italian or all Spanish or all Asian or all, whatever your ethnic group is, your whole paradigm would have been still caught up in that ethnicity and that culture because it was everything around you was that. And then you didn't realize actually other people did other things outside of your own little place because that's all you ever experienced. I mean, I know people that grew up in parts of New York where they never had to speak English. There are parts that I know where you could speak Polish all day long. Everybody speaks Polish. Everybody is Polish. And the whole area, all the businesses are in Polish. You understand what I'm saying? Or Italian, or Greek, or you just fill in the blanks. I'm not picking on any culture. But then there's a paradigm shift to realize there's more out there. And what we came to realize, it's not about what was acceptable on this level, but what's acceptable on a vertical level. So not on a horizontal level. I have to forget that not everybody's watching on a video, that they might be listening. And so I have to explain what I'm doing with my hand gestures here. So then we get to the biggest problem, the last shift. I'll call it the fourth paradigm shift, which is a shift in our understanding paradigm-wise of maturity. What defines mature behavior or mature mindset? What makes someone looked at and say that's someone who is mature or someone that is emotionally stable, etc.? Because we have a very emotionally unstable world. Just look at what's going on in the politics in this country. People have gone and lost their emotional minds on both sides. So I'm not going to pick on one more than the other, although I think it probably is worse on one side or the other. It doesn't matter. The point is, it's an emotional immaturity. You see, we have to go from babes to mature adults. This is not what we were reading in 1 Corinthians. Shaul said, I wanted to give you food, but you were like babes. You were still suckling on the milk, and even that you couldn't handle. So it's a lack of the fourth paradigm shift where we have to grow up. Oh, you see, but we're not wanting to grow up because, after all, growing up means that I have to maybe not just kick my feet and throw a tantrum because I want my way. See, I watch 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and teenagers even that will throw tantrums because I want my way. And I'm going to throw a fit and make you suffer till I get my way. Guess what? Adults are doing the same foolishness because they have to have their way. No, Abba gets to have his way. That's the key here. There's a verse in Isaiah, I think, talks about this. Isaiah chapter 3 and verse 1. Yeshayahu, Isaiah chapter 3 and in verse 1. I want to read just a couple of verses here. For look, the Master Yahweh of hosts is turning aside from Jerusalem and from Yehuda the stock and the store, all the supply of bread and all the supply of water, the mighty man and the man of battle, the judge and the prophet, and the diviner and the elder, the commander of 50 and the highly respected man, and the counselor and the skilled craftsman and the clever enchanter. And I shall make youths their heads, and the children shall rule over them. And people shall exert pressure, man on his neighbor. The young rise up against the older, and the lightly esteemed against the highly esteemed. This is a prophecy about a time when we shall be ruled over by emotional children. It's not talking about literally 8 and 10-year-olds now are running the country. That's not what he's talking about here. He says, look, the young shall rise up against the elder. He's talking about maturity levels, I believe. He says, I'm going to make the children, the youth shall be their heads. So who's running the show in the Messianic? I don't know, people that have been doing this less than 5 years, less than 3 years. Some people have been doing it less than a year, and all of a sudden they got websites, YouTubes, channels, everybody's following and listening to them. The youths are running the show. I think this is talking about an emotional age, not a physical age. I shall make those who are emotionally young the head over those that are emotionally more mature. The children shall rule over them. Do you see that happening today? Is that what we see? There it is. Isaiah prophesied in chapter 3. I absolutely believe that's talking about today. It wasn't only talking about today, by the way. It's been talking about every age and every group since Isaiah said it, and prior to him saying it too. The children are running the show. And I don't care if you're 70, 60, or 50, some of you still act like you're 12. Because you're going to kick and scream and make everybody miserable, because when you were 12, that worked. If you made everybody miserable enough, you got your way. Worked especially when you were 1 and 2 and 3. Right? That's what we get the terrible twos. The terrible twos are not because all of a sudden a child becomes terrible. It's because he realizes if I'm terrible, I get what I want. Because I can wear them out. That's why they become, quote unquote, terrible twos. And by the way, it doesn't start at 2. It can start at 18 months. It can go all the way till 57 or 77. When they realize it works, because we let it work, they're going to keep doing it. Some of you are still in your terrible twos. It's sad, but it's true. Because you're going to kick and scream and make everybody miserable till you get your way. So what's going on here? Okay, this is where I want to go back to my notes that are on my phone. So give me a second to get back to that page. So we're looking at unity from the point of view as how is unity affected by emotional immaturity? See, when we're all needing it to be our way, how can you have unity? Oh, but I don't like that. Think of it this way, okay? I've got a small family, relatively speaking. I got 4, right? My wife and I and 2 children. Guess how often we all agree on where we want to go eat? Not usually. Maybe 3 out of 4 agree, maybe 2 and 2, maybe 4 different opinions. It's not easy because everybody wants what they want. And guess what? The one who doesn't get what they want, if it's 3-1, is going to sit there and make everybody else miserable because they didn't get their way. Happens a lot. And sometimes it's the adult that does it. Okay, the children and one adult agrees, and the one adult that didn't get their way, they're going to make everybody else suffer. Why? Because there's an emotional immaturity. There's an emotional immaturity. So what's going on here? What's going on is that because we're emotionally immature, why do we kick and scream? Why do we get upset? Because we're either jealous, because somebody else got their way and we didn't, or we're envious from that point of view, or we're offended. Oh, well, you like them better. Oh, well, you always let them win. Oh, see, now I'm taking it and I'm offended. We're taking it as an offense. See, when people are challenged in their comfort, where in Scripture does it say that if you follow me, you're going to be comfortable? Did Yeshua ever say that? Well, I don't like that. It's not comfortable. I don't know all that Hebrew stuff. That's uncomfortable. Well, I don't know how to dance like they do. That's uncomfortable. Oh, I never learned that in Torah before. That's uncomfortable. Can I give you from Abba a giant so what? What does that have to do with anything? It's uncomfortable. He actually promises you that following him is going to be very uncomfortable. Why? Because the rest of the world isn't following him. If everybody was, it would be wonderfully comfortable and easy to do. But they're not. What are we doing to others, and how are we responding to others' actions and behaviors? Are we responding in an emotionally stable way? Are we mature? See, in my notes, I talk about this. One of the ways that you can measure where you are in your maturity level is how you handle emotions. Emotions as a measure of your maturity. If you are in control of your emotions, in other words, you can choose the appropriate time to be emotional. So I'm not saying that mature people are never emotional and we're just very straight, no laughing, no crying, no joy, no. But there's appropriate times to laugh. There's very inappropriate times to laugh. There are appropriate times to cry. There's appropriate time to respond in whatever way that you want. We're talking about there's appropriate times. You know? I mean, even in the book of Kohelet, in Ecclesiastes, it says a time to laugh, a time for joy, time for crying. So, but when you allow your emotions to control you, when your emotions are out of control, when it's the emotion that's generating the behavior because the emotion is driving things. I like that. I want to continue to feel good in it because that gives me so much joy. So I'm going to keep doing that which made me happy, even if Abba said not to do it. But it made me happy, but Abba said not to do it. But I like it, but Abba said not to do it. See, the emotion's starting to rule. So then what do? Then you start to spin what Abba said to justify allowing you to have what you liked. Or we take it from the other side. Abba said to do this, but I don't want to. But he said to do it, but it's going to make me uncomfortable. But he said to do it, but I don't like it. But he said to do it, but it's going to draw attention to me. I don't like attention. But he said to do it. Get the emotions out of it. You know, I used to be a personal trainer years and years ago, and I had to tell all of my clients, action generates the emotion. In other words, if you don't like something, you don't feel like it, go do it, and you might realize, wow, I'm glad I did that. How many of you don't have to raise your hands, but you can, how many of you have come to services when you really didn't feel like it and were so glad you did? Okay? But you woke up that morning like, I don't want to do this. I'm tired. I can use an excuse and say, well, I was just too tired to come. But then the sermon was exactly what you needed. Or the person you sat next to during the oneg said something that was exactly what you needed. Or somebody needed you, which was exactly what you needed. So the emotion is generated by the action. But we're too controlled by our emotions. And so that's what's happening. That's where all the division comes from. Because you know what? You're only happiest when everything is the way you like it. The more everything is the way you like it, the more you're comfortable and happy. So this is what happens. You're in a group. We'll call it an assembly or a congregation, because that's what we're dealing with. Or a home fellowship, or whatever it is that you're involved in. And you've been going there for, I don't know, a couple of months. And you know what happens? At some point, you're no longer visiting. You've decided, this is my congregation. This is where I'm going to come all the time. I'm actually going to feel like and be part of this group. And as soon as you make that decision, your brain is going to switch over into a very dangerous place. The place where now that you took ownership, you should have an opinion that's voiced and things should change to be molded into your image. Happens in every congregation. Happens here every time we get new people. That at some point, when they make that decision, not all of them do this. The ones who are more emotionally mature don't do this. But a lot of them do. Almost every split we've had in this congregation has come from, at some point, people being long enough to decide, this is my congregation now. I'm going to be attending it. So now they need to hear what I have to say because I need to make a few changes. By the way, husbands, wives, anybody dealt with that after saying I do? Think about it. You weren't thinking to try to change all that much before the I do, but after the I do, now you're saying, okay, now that he's mine, or now that she's mine, we need to change a few things. Some of you are still dealing with that, being married 30 years. Stop that. Knock that off. That's not the way to deal with things. It's not relationship. But see, here's the thing. You came into a relationship that didn't say that you started attending and that you were enjoying it and you were being blessed by it, only so that at some point you can now remold it into your image. Well, everything's great, but I really think we should meet an hour earlier because, it gets late and I have to drive. Or, we need to be an hour later because I drive far and I can't get there so early. Oh, but I think we should do less songs. Or, that prayer time sure takes a long time and I don't really, I'm bored during that. I mean, all of a sudden, your opinion becomes much more important to be voiced because, after all, it's your congregation now too. Don't you see this with Moses in the desert? Hey, Moses, do you ever see Moses taking a consensus vote? Or any kind of vote? Now, he had heads of thousands, hundreds, 50s. When do you see him bringing those guys together and say, okay, I want everybody's opinion, and we're going to vote? By the way, do you see Paul ever do this? I mean, after all, Paul's like the hero from mainstream Christianity. They use him, right, as an example. No, when he wrote his letters to Corinth, Ephesus, Philippi, did he write them saying, here's some suggestions, do what you want? Or did he expect to be followed and listened to? He expected them to do what he said, didn't he? He said, I found out there's some problems over there. This is what you guys need to do. No, this is my congregation now. I don't have to listen to you. My opinion. We had that happen here, I don't even know how many years ago it was, but one of the members had a problem over something and said, well, I don't like that decision. I said, I understand. Nevertheless, this is the decision. Well, I don't think everybody agrees with you. I said, I understand. Nevertheless, this is the decision. Well, I think we all need to vote on it. No, we don't. Oh, you're just a control cultist, whatever. No. I'm providing something for you. By the way, that's the other thing people misunderstand, is they misunderstand, and this is the emotional immaturity. What is it that I am obligated, me meaning whoever's standing in the front, whoever's leading the group, not just me. I'm representing all leadership right now, as an example. What does that leadership actually have an obligation to provide you with? Do I need to provide you with a meal? No. So if you don't like the food, that's not my thing to provide you anyway. Do I need to provide entertainment for your children so your children have stuff to do after services? No. Do I need to provide you with, keep filling in all those blanks. I need to provide you with a place to come and meet together and praise and worship Abba and be instructed in his word. That's it. But yet, all of a sudden, now do I have to do it in a particular way? No. I have the authority as the leader to decide how that's done. Do I listen to your opinion? Absolutely. Absolutely I do. I'll give you an example. We do the Vishamru, okay, as part of our prayer, the Vishamru. And we were doing it a different way for a couple of weeks. And during the Oneg, one of the ladies sat next to me and said, hey, we need to change the Vishamru back to the other way. And I said, hey. No, she said, she goes, you need to change it back. And I said, hey, I don't need to do anything. I said, but I agree with you. I do think we need to change it. But you don't need to talk to the leader that way. And I happen to agree. And we made the change. But see, look at the mindset of the person to say, hey, you need to change this. What do you mean I need to change this? Isn't that what was happening with Korach and those guys with Moses? Hey, you need to change this. Nobody made you come here. Unless it was Abba that drew you and he made you come here. And he didn't send you here to change what I'm doing or whoever the leader is. And this is not just about me. It's about all leadership. He didn't send you to wherever you are to make that leader change. Now, if what that leader's doing really doesn't work for you, go somewhere else. Don't attack him. Don't act like you're throwing a little tantrum, make everybody suffer because you didn't have your way. I used to have a guy come up to me in Nashville many, many years ago after services. And we say, I don't think we're supposed to have a guy up in the front doing all of this and that and the other thing. We should all be sitting in a circle and sharing equally whatever. And I said, I appreciate your point, but this is the way we're going to do things. Now, he did that for like 3 weeks. And the third week, I said to him, can I ask you a question? He said, sure. I said, why do you come? Why do you come here? He goes, because I like it, and this and the other thing. I said, well, I've already made it clear we're not changing the format, so then why do you come up every week and make the same point? I said, I promise you, I'm not changing the format. See, I didn't understand the mindset of he asked, I said, we're not doing it, that's it. But that's the way it is scripturally. Oh, no, we should have, a kumbaya elders committee vote on everything, or we should, so all sit in a circle with no teacher. That's the way a lot of groups are doing it, and they're going nowhere. People enjoy themselves, though, because without a teacher, without a leader to make it kind of clear what's right and what's wrong and how things are supposed to be done, anything goes. So it's very comfortable because everything's fine. But then they don't grow, and they don't go anywhere. We have a problem with being selfish. That's where it really comes down to. And our emotional immaturity as our child. There's nothing more selfish, and by the way, it's not inappropriate, than a 1 and 2 year old. All they can understand is, I need, I want. That's all they can understand. But we're supposed to eventually grow out of that. Because as far as they know, and by the way, we taught them, the world revolves around them. Because it has for 1 or 2 years of every minute of their life, the world has revolved around them. Their every need was attended to quickly. And so everything revolved around them. They didn't understand that we don't all exist to please them. But that's what you would think as a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. That everything I've ever, as soon as I even hint to cry, they come running and fix it. And give me whatever I want. We're supposed to grow past that. So we have to get into the selfless place, okay? We have to get to the selfless place. But my thought is, are we missing the point? When you come into a group, if we were selfless, would you be looking for reasons to stay or reasons to leave? Because I promise you, you can find both. You can. You can find reasons to stay if you look for them. You can find reasons to leave if you look for them. Well, so-and-so did this or so-and-so did that or, whatever it was. And by the way, that's because we're self-focused and not selfless. If you're selfless, you can't get offended. If you're selfless, you cannot have those kind of emotional things. It takes a self to get offended because you say, these are the words you say, I am offended. Well, get the I out of there. There's nothing to offend. You understand what I'm saying? And we have this all in the teaching, Developing the Character of Yeshua, when we talk about what it means to be selfless. He says, look, are we missing the point? I want us to kind of cover this real quickly. Are we missing the point? The point being, this is not about us. It's about him. That's the paradigm shift. You must shift our understanding. It goes back to focus, that we focus and realize our shift in focus is not on us, but it's on him. It's all about him. Why do you exist? Why is there salvation? Why is all this stuff going on? Why did he call you and draw you into a Torah observant life? Because it's about him. Now, by the way, your being happy is also about him. He wants you to be happy. He wants you to be filled with joy. But still, only because it's about him. Because it's what he wants. Because it makes him happy if you're happy. But he wants to teach you the right way to true happiness, true joy. It's all about becoming the type of person that he wants to live with for eternity. We tried to talk about that for years. We hadn't really talked about it much lately. That was our whole focus about 4 or 5 years ago, is, are you becoming the type of person Yahweh wants to spend eternity with? And the answer is, okay, yes, I want to become that person. So what does that look like? You know what it looks like? It looks like Yeshua. That's why we're told to conform and transform into his image. Because that's what the person looks like. The one person in existence that has ever lived that we know for sure the Father wants to spend forever with, that's the Son. The more you're like him, the more you're going to be the one he wants to spend forever with. That's why we're told to transform and conform into his image. So what does that look like? It looks like Torah observance in the context of the fruit of the Ruach, love, joy, peace, patience, etc. Galatians 5:22 and 23. That's what Yeshua was, right? He walked completely in the fruit of the Spirit, and he was completely obedient and Torah observant. Without fail. Okay, that's what it looks like. So I've got some really cool things I want to cover after this. We'll cover that in part 3. I'm going to close here because we're already over an hour. But I want us to really think about that. Okay, are we ready to make the necessary paradigm shift that brings unity? Because it's his desire that we be one as he is one. But it's never going to happen if we're not going to grow up. It doesn't take a cultish obedience and submission to an authority of a group. It takes maturity to come together in unity, to be of one mind and one opinion. And that opinion is Abba's right. Okay? That's the opinion. It's not, you just want us all to agree with you, Rabbi Steve. No, I want you to agree with him. And he says he wants us to all be one. Let's agree with that. Father, we want to come before you and stand in agreement with your desire that we all be one. Father, we want to come before you and confess that we are just struggling mightily to do this. And in confessing our weakness, Father, we ask that you would give us guidance, wisdom, strength to grow up and to deal with the fires that mature people have to go through that help to grow us, to mature us into that new man that looks like Yeshua, to be conformed and transformed into his image. So, Father, we come to you now asking that you would help us to be humbled, to learn what it means to be selfless, to help us to have our emotions dealt with so that we can understand how we can be those that are going through this process to demonstrate that we are those that are approved by doing those things that you approve of. And that includes our character, our behavior, our attitudes. Because quite frankly, I think we need to understand that you can be 100% absolutely commandment observant, Torah observant, and still have a really lousy attitude. And who wants to spend forever with that? Who's going to want to spend forever with those of us that have terrible, miserable attitudes? So, Father, help us to have that all purged out of us, to be purified out of us so that we might be left with an attitude of thankfulness and appreciation and submission to your authority. Father, we thank you. We thank you. We know how weak we are. We know how flawed we are, but we thank you that you would not give up on us, that you will continue to help us, strengthen us, and fill us with your wisdom and understanding as we come before you now, asking and seeking and knocking, so that we might all be changed into the image of Yeshua and to one day spend eternity with you both. So, Father, we want to come before you now, thanking you, praising you, and asking in the name, the authority, and the absolute might of Yeshua Messiah. Amen. Amen.